Harold sat in his worn armchair, the fabric faded and frayed from years of use. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting gentle beams across the living room. But it couldn't chase away the shadows of his loneliness. It had been over a year since his wife passed away, and every corner of their home felt heavy with memories. Though friends would occasionally check in, he often found himself alone with only the ticking clock for company. Every morning began with a familiar routine. Harold would shuffle to the kitchen, brew a strong cup of coffee, and gaze out into the garden where his wife once tended to flowers with brightness and care. The garden now stood unattended, wild and overgrown. Harold knew he should get out there and tend to it, but every time he made a plan, the drive fizzled out. He instead occupied himself with simple chores, trying to fill the silence. Then there was Zeus, his loyal rescue canine. This scruffy, spirited dog had come into Harold's life at just the right moment. The moment they met at the shelter, something clicked. Zeus wagged his tail fiercely, as if he understood how much Harold needed companionship. They quickly became inseparable. Wherever Harold went, Zeus followed closely at his heels. However, lately, things took a strange turn. It started gradually. Zeus began to act odd during those quiet hours of the night. At first, it was just gentle nudges with his paws against Harold's legs, while he watched television or read a book. But soon those nudges turned more urgent. He'd paw at him more insistently in the early hours when most people were sound asleep. "Maybe you just need some more exercise," Harold told Zeus one evening as they walked around their small neighborhood park. He hoped fresh air would do them both good. Yet Zeus would show unusual reluctance to leave Harold's side, often looking back as if he sensed something amiss. This change worried Harold. Was something wrong with Zeus? On 2 separate occasions, convinced that something was not right about his furry friend's behavior, he reluctantly returned him to the shelter. "He's acting strange," he explained to the staff, frustration creeping into his voice each time they returned him without any answers. Each time he brought Zeus home again, their bond seemed to grow stronger yet more complicated by this inexplicable concern for his well-being. But despite his worries and attempts to understand what was happening with his dog, he simply accepted their new normal. One fateful night illuminated everything. The sky blanketed in stars as sleep drifted into Harold's gaze, when Zeus woke him suddenly at 3 a.m. by climbing onto his chest. Startled awake and confused, Harold realized that Zeus wouldn't budge. It was as if something deep inside the dog knew danger loomed close by. "Zeus, what is it?" Harold whispered urgently in disbelief as panic began to set in. For reasons that eluded him at that moment, all he could think was that this behavior meant far more than just discomfort or confusion. Zeus bounded across the living room, his scruffy fur glistening in the sunlight that streamed through the window. With a joyful bark and wagging tail, he brought a sense of life into Harold's quiet home. The bond between them was undeniable. It was as if they had both been rescued from their loneliness by each other. Harold often thought that Zeus had a way of understanding him, sensing his emotions even before he himself fully understood them. When Harold first met Zeus at the shelter, he felt an instant connection. The dog had been timid at first, nervously sniffing the air around him. But as soon as their eyes met, something clicked. In that moment, Harold saw a spark of hope in the dog's eyes, and he knew he had to take him home. The joy that filled their days together was infectious. They would spend hours in the park, where Zeus would chase after frisbees, his playful barks echoing through the trees. Harold couldn't help but laugh as Zeus stumbled over his own paws in his eagerness to catch the flying disc. At home, Zeus had a knack for brightening Harold's mood. Whether it was curling up next to him on the couch during those long evenings or nudging him gently with his nose when he felt too low, Zeus was a constant source of comfort. He sensed when Harold needed company and would plop himself down beside him with a satisfied sigh, as if to say, "I'm here for you." However, recently, Harold noticed subtle changes in Zeus's behavior that ignited worry within him. The dog who once bounded with pure energy now seemed restless and anxious at odd hours. Harold could hardly remember a time when Zeus wouldn't leap excitedly at the sight of his leash or at the mention of going outside for a walk. Now they would be halfway through their evening routine when Zeus would suddenly stop and look back at Harold with wide eyes, as if gauging whether it was safe to stay close. The evenings turned into a mix of comfort and concern. Though Harold cherished having Zeus by his side, the dog's actions puzzled him deeply. What could possibly be troubling such a lively spirit? During quiet moments watching television or reading books, Zeus would paw insistently at Harold's leg. At first, it felt like playful nudges seeking attention, but soon those nudges transformed into something more urgent and desperate. Despite this worry, every time Harold took Zeus back to the shelter, twice now, he felt an aching loss every time he handed over the leash. Surely there was something wrong with his beloved companion. Yet each time he returned home without him, the silence became palpable. It was as if he had lost a part of himself. Yet each return marked an unbreakable bond between Harold and Zeus. They needed each other now more than ever. And while the shadows loomed large in their lives due to loss and confusion, their shared moments of joy remained like flickering lights in the dark. One fateful night loomed ahead when it all came to a head. A night that would reveal just how deep their connection truly ran and how much they needed one another beyond mere companionship. The bond between Harold and Zeus had always been special, but lately, it was overshadowed by strange and concerning behaviors that left Harold uneasy. It began with Zeus's habit of pawing at Harold during the quiet hours of the night. As he settled into bed, hoping for a peaceful sleep, he would feel a gentle yet persistent nudging against his arm. At first, it was just a gentle reminder that Zeus was nearby, but soon it turned into something more urgent. The rhythmic pawing echoed in the stillness, interrupting what little rest Harold could find. Harold would turn to reassure the dog with soft words. "It's okay, buddy. Just go back to sleep." But instead of settling down, Zeus seemed to grow more anxious. He would circle around the bed, pacing like a restless spirit unable to find comfort. During the day, Zeus's behavior only intensified Harold's worries. Previously an energetic dog who loved chasing after frisbees, he now clung closely to Harold as if he feared being apart. Whether they were in the garden or relaxing on the couch, Zeus rarely strayed more than a few feet away from his owner's side. If Harold stood up to move to another room, Zeus would follow immediately, his eyes locked onto Harold like a shadow that refused to leave. It wasn't just his clinginess that puzzled Harold. It was also the peculiar barking that erupted unexpectedly throughout the day and night. Sometimes Zeus would bark at nothing at all, the empty space near the window or even a shadow cast by the setting sun. The barking was sharp and intense, startling Harold out of his thoughts as he wondered what might be troubling his furry companion. Had a squirrel dared to venture too close? Was something lurking just out of sight that only Zeus could sense? Harold tried to rationalize the odd behavior. Perhaps Zeus was picking up on his own sadness and unease since losing his wife. After all, dogs often reflect their owner's feelings in their own ways. He'd comfort himself with thoughts of taking Zeus back to the park for some fresh air and perhaps regain some normalcy in their lives. But even these plans seemed futile. He couldn't ignore how increasingly worried he felt for Zeus's well-being. The past few months had built an invisible wall of confusion between them, one exacerbated by Harold's own grief and anxiety. After 2 trips to the shelter without resolution and feeling defeated, he reluctantly accepted that he was helpless against this shift in their routine. What could possibly be wrong with a dog so full of life? Despite these unanswered questions, deep down, Harold knew they needed each other now more than ever. One fateful night, as darkness enveloped everything outside and silence filled the house, there came an unsettling moment when all these strange behaviors would suddenly come to a head. One night that would force Harold to reckon with the truth of what had been unfolding right before him. As the days passed, Harold's initial confusion regarding Zeus's odd behaviors began to morph into genuine concern. Each time he felt the gentle nudging against his arm in the middle of the night, a knot of worry formed in his stomach. What could be troubling his usually spirited companion? The rhythmic pawing was a stark contrast to the boisterous dog he once knew, and it felt as if something unseen was weighing heavily on both of them. Harold sought to comfort himself with rationalizations. "Maybe he's just getting older," he would murmur to himself. Yet, deep down, he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was very wrong. The dog who used to bounce excitedly around the house now seemed trapped in a state of unease, as if he were sensing danger that Harold could not perceive. The mornings became particularly challenging. As Harold brewed his coffee and looked out at their neglected garden, he would notice Zeus looking up at him with wide, anxious eyes. The playful energy that once filled the room had been replaced by a heavy silence that pressed down on Harold's heart. He would kneel beside Zeus and scratch behind his ears, hoping to ease whatever discomfort haunted him. "What is it, boy?" he'd ask softly, but Zeus would only gaze back at him earnestly, as if trying to convey a message that remained unspoken. One afternoon, after returning from yet another failed trip to the shelter where they found no answers, Harold sank onto the couch in defeat. Zeus curled up next to him on the cushions but then abruptly jumped up and began pacing again, his nails clicking against the floor as he walked back and forth before Harold's chair. "You don't think I'm going to leave you again, do you?" Harold asked with a forced chuckle, attempting to lighten the mood despite his growing worry. On several occasions, when they settled down for movie nights or quiet reading sessions, Zeus would suddenly bolt upright and bark at nothing in particular. Each outburst startled Harold from his thoughts and sent chills down his spine. What was causing Zeus's agitation? Was there something lurking just beyond their line of sight that only Zeus could sense? Every bark echoed through their empty home like a warning bell that something was amiss. Slowly but surely, Harold felt an invisible wall building between them, a wall constructed from uncertainty and anxiety. Even as he sought solace in moments shared with Zeus, doubt crept into the corners of his mind. Was it possible for a dog to simply sense despair? Did Zeus understand the depth of Harold's grief after losing his wife? Despite these questions swirling in his head, every time they exchanged glances or shared quiet moments together renewed Harold's belief that they were meant for one another. They were companions bound by circumstance and unspoken understanding. Still, this newfound bond didn't lessen Harold's fear. Instead, it grew stronger alongside it. Then came that fateful night when everything reached a breaking point. An unexpected moment that transformed all those concerns into urgent action and revealed just how deeply connected they truly were. It was clear, neither man nor dog could bear this weight alone anymore. Feeling increasingly frustrated and confused about Zeus's unsettling behavior, Harold made the difficult decision to take his loyal companion back to the shelter for help. He drove there with a sense of dread, clutching the handle of Zeus's leash tightly as they approached the familiar building. The doors loomed ahead like a threshold between hope and disappointment. Each time he entered the shelter, the memories flooded back. The warmth of connection when he had first adopted Zeus, how the dog had brought light to his dark days. The staff welcomed him with warm smiles, but today Harold felt a weight pressing on his chest. "I think something is wrong with Zeus," he explained, his voice tinged with worry. "He's been acting strange, pawing at me at night, refusing to leave my side, barking at nothing." As he spoke, he watched Zeus shift anxiously at his feet, casting uneasy glances around the room as if searching for an escape. The shelter staff exchanged concerned looks before assuring him that they would evaluate Zeus and help determine what might be troubling him. While they took Zeus into a separate room to check him over, Harold waited in a small chair, tapping his foot anxiously on the floor. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as he sat there grappling with guilt and uncertainty. He couldn't help but think that perhaps he was abandoning his dog instead of seeking help. When they finally returned with Zeus, the staff wore sympathetic expressions that only deepened Harold's frustration. "He seems healthy," one of the workers said gently. "There's no sign of any behavioral issues we can address right now." They assured him that Zeus was in good health and appeared happy but recommended that he monitor the situation closely. "What do you mean, monitor?" Harold asked, incredulity creeping into his voice. "He's not the same dog I adopted. Something has changed." It felt like a game of pulling teeth. No matter how hard he tried to explain the urgency of their situation, his words fell flat against their reassurances. After discussing it further, they ultimately returned Zeus back to him without any substantial explanation or reassurance that anything could be done. With a heavy heart, Harold left the shelter feeling defeated. It seemed impossible that no one else could see or understand what was happening inside his home. As he drove back through familiar streets, he couldn't shake off the feeling of helplessness gnawing at him. It wasn't just Zeus who was suffering. It was Harold too, caught in this cycle of concern and confusion. What if there truly was something wrong? Each failed attempt to solve the problem only deepened his frustration and fear. Days passed into weeks, yet nothing changed. The burden of their situation continued weighing heavily on both man and dog. Despite their previous bond growing stronger through shared pain and sorrow, this new wave of uncertainty created an invisible barrier between them both. Harold's heart sank each time he thought back to those visits at the shelter, each time feeling more solidified in isolation as staff members could provide no solutions. He realized that he couldn't afford another trip like that. It had left him feeling empty and powerless. It wasn't long before he found himself returning to routines familiar in their sameness. These moments with Zeus became both a comfort and a reminder of unresolved fears, until their lives reached a fateful point where everything would change, forcing them to confront what lay beneath their struggles together. Despite the unsettling changes in Zeus's behavior, the emotional connection between Harold and his loyal companion remained unshakable. Each day, as they navigated their routines together, it became evident that their bond was woven from shared experiences, unspoken understanding, and a deep-seated need for one another. Even in moments of confusion and worry, Harold felt comforted simply by Zeus's presence. When Zeus would paw at him in the middle of the night or follow him closely around the house, it reminded Harold of the countless times he had leaned on his dog for emotional support. There was an undeniable loyalty that flowed between them, one that went beyond mere companionship. As much as Harold worried about what was happening to Zeus, he also found solace in knowing they faced their struggles side by side. Every morning, Harold would prepare coffee while Zeus lay curled up at his feet, a steady presence that grounded him amidst his grief. Harold often talked to Zeus as if he were a confidant, sharing snippets of memories about his wife and their life together. "You would have loved her," he'd say softly as he scratched behind Zeus's ears. He imagined how much joy his wife would have felt watching Zeus chase after butterflies or greet strangers with boundless enthusiasm. On days when the sun shone brightly across their garden, Harold would take Zeus outside for fresh air. Although they didn't venture far from home anymore, those moments felt sacred. As they sat on the porch together, Harold often looked into Zeus's expressive eyes and felt understood without needing words. Despite everything that worried him about Zeus's unusual actions, those quiet afternoons served as reminders of the joy they had once shared. Yet there were times when uncertainty clouded their bond. The barking at nothing and restless pacing occasionally sent waves of anxiety through both of them. During one particularly tense evening after returning home from the shelter empty-handed, Harold noticed how closely Zeus sat beside him on the couch, almost as if he were trying to shield his owner from invisible threats lurking just out of sight. "Things will get better," he whispered to Zeus one evening as rain pattered gently against the windows. "We'll figure this out together." Though it felt like an empty promise amid growing uncertainty, he hoped that their mutual support would carry them through. In those moments of shared vulnerability, it became clear to Harold just how intertwined their lives had become. They were two souls navigating a world filled with shadows, but together they created small pockets of light. Each touch of Zeus's paw or soft nuzzle against his leg reaffirmed their connection. It reminded Harold that he was not alone in his pain or grief. As days turned into weeks and worries continued to plague them both, an unbreakable bond emerged from their struggles. A bond built on resilience and love despite hardship. The weight of uncertainty still lingered heavily in the air between them, but each shared glance told a story deeper than words could convey. That evening was unlike any other. A quiet stillness enveloped them both as they settled down for a long night ahead, when everything changed forever and forced both man and dog to confront what had been hidden beneath their struggles for so long. On that particular night, the house was draped in a heavy silence, broken only by the faint sounds of the wind outside. Harold tossed and turned in his bed, unable to shake the feeling that something was off, despite the dim light from the street lamp casting soft shadows across his room. Just after 3 a.m., Zeus, who had been sleeping contentedly on the floor beside the bed, suddenly sprang into action. With an urgency Harold had never seen before, Zeus bounded up onto the bed, climbing directly onto Harold's chest. The sheer weight and warmth of the dog were startling, pulling Harold from his restless dreams into a state of confusion. "What is it, boy?" he mumbled groggily, still trying to grasp what was happening. Zeus pressed down firmly as if anchoring himself to Harold, his bright eyes wide with an intensity that sent a chill up Harold's spine. The usual spark in those eyes was replaced by an uncharacteristic seriousness that made Harold's heart race. "Zeus, get down," he urged softly, attempting to coax the dog off him, but Zeus would not budge. Instead, he whined softly and licked Harold's face in a desperate attempt to get him to respond. Harold's sleepy mind began to connect the dots. Was the dog sensing something he couldn't? The pounding in his chest intensified, not just from their unusual circumstance but also from the pulse of worry that surged through him. Something felt very wrong. "Are you okay, buddy?" Harold whispered, trying to reassure both himself and Zeus. Still, Zeus remained firmly planted on him, his body tense and alert. The instinctual bond they shared took hold of them both as uncertainty loomed like an unwelcome shadow in their peaceful home. In those moments, time felt elastic, stretching out as anxiety mingled with confusion. Harold lifted his phone, considering calling his daughter for help, but something deep inside urged him to act immediately. They needed assistance now, not later. "Okay, I'm calling 911, he finally decided aloud. But instead of dialing, he hesitated for a moment as thoughts swirled in his head. He could call his daughter first. She would know what to do. But as he looked down at Zeus, whose eyes seemed to implore him for action, he directed dialed emergency services instead. 911, came the calm voice on the other end. "What's your emergency?" As Harold explained the situation in a hurried breath, he couldn't help but glance down at Zeus. The dog watched him with an intensity that pierced through his mounting panic, a mix of concern and urgency radiating between them. Seconds felt like hours until the paramedics finally arrived at their door. The uniformed figures moved efficiently through the house, and it wasn't long before they began to check Harold's vitals. As one paramedic placed a finger on Harold's wrist to check his pulse, another kept glancing at Zeus, who maintained close proximity as if guarding his owner against unseen threats. "Sir, we're picking up some signs of cardiac arrest," one of the paramedics said urgently, pulling out equipment to assist Harold further. Disbelief washed over him. It felt surreal yet undeniably urgent as he realized why Zeus had acted with such fervor that night. In his heart, he knew this moment was not just coincidence. It reflected something deeper than either he or Zeus could articulate, a bond forged by love in times of struggle. As they prepared to transport him to the hospital, Harold took one last look at Zeus and whispered, "Good boy, you saved me." In that moment, everything shifted. Their relationship transformed into a lifeline built on trust and instinct that neither had fully understood until now. Amid the chaos of that fateful night, as anxiety coursed through Harold's veins, his first instinct was to reach for his daughter's number. The warmth of her voice had always been a soothing balm in moments of distress, and he hoped she would help him make sense of what was happening. His hands shook slightly as he dialed, and the phone rang with a sense of urgency that matched his racing heart. "Dad?" Her voice came through, calm and steady, a comforting presence even over the phone. "What's going on?" "It's Zeus," Harold said hurriedly, glancing down at the dog who remained steadfast on his chest. "He woke me up and won't get off. I don't know what's wrong. He's acting strange." "What do you mean strange?" she asked, her tone shifting slightly but remaining reassuring. "He's just different," Harold stammered, trying to find the right words. "I think something is wrong with him. Maybe I should take him back to the shelter again." "Dad, listen to me," she interrupted gently but firmly, sensing his rising panic. "You need to call 911 first. It sounds like something is seriously wrong." Harold hesitated at her insistence. His mind raced with thoughts of Zeus and how he felt helpless in that moment. How could he think about himself when his dog was acting this way? But Zeus, What if he needs help? I understand that, she replied softly, grounding him with her calmness. But you need help too. If something is wrong with you. The thought hit him like a cold wave crashing over him. He hadn't fully registered how tightly anxiety had gripped him alongside concern for Zeus. Her words cut through the fog of confusion as clarity began to dawn on him. Okay, he finally breathed out slowly, his resolve strengthening as he placed the phone down momentarily while keeping it nearby. His daughter still on the line listening intently. With a deep breath, he picked up the phone again and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Came the calm voice from the operator, as Harold relayed their situation. A mix of fear for both himself and for Zeus. He couldn't help but steal furtive glances at his canine companion. Each bark and whine echoed in the stillness of the room like a plea for action, reminding him that they were in this together. His daughter listened as he spoke, offering quiet encouragement from afar, while actively remaining on hold, so she could stay connected with him during those critical moments. After what felt like an eternity waiting for help to arrive, relief washed over Harold when he heard sirens approaching from down the street. Their sound echoed with an urgency that mirrored the rising tension in his chest. As paramedics entered their home with purpose, moving swiftly through each room with practiced efficiency, Harold felt both gratitude and apprehension swell within him. He was grateful they were there but anxious about what they might find. In that whirlwind of activity, one paramedic checked Harold's vitals while another observed Zeus closely, as if weighing their collective concerns against unseen threats lurking in the shadows. It became clear in those moments just how intertwined their lives had become. Their struggles reflected in one another's eyes, and it hit Harold hard that calling his daughter had been the best decision he could have made that night. While everything unfolded around them like a blur, a storm of concern enveloping them, Harold knew deep down that this bond forged between man and dog would carry them through whatever lay ahead. They were not just companions anymore. They were lifelines tethering each other to hope amidst uncertainty. The sound of sirens crescendoed as the paramedics approached, cutting through the stillness of the night and filling Harold with a mixture of relief and rising tension. When they burst through the door, their presence brought an overwhelming sense of urgency into the room. The two responders moved swiftly, their practiced efficiency evident as they assessed the situation with sharp eyes. "Where's the patient?" one of them asked, glancing around the dimly lit living room before settling his gaze on Harold, who was still seated on the couch with Zeus firmly at his side. The loyal dog had not moved an inch since Harold's call for help, his watchful gaze unwavering. "I'm here," Harold said, his voice trembling slightly as he raised a hand to indicate his location. He could feel the weight of concern in their eyes as they approached him. "Okay, let's take a look at you," one paramedic said, kneeling beside him and pulling out a stethoscope while the other began to prepare supplies. "Can you tell us what happened?" Harold swallowed hard, recounting how Zeus had woken him and wouldn't let him go back to sleep. "I don't know why he acted that way tonight, but I felt something was wrong with me." His words came out in a rush as anxiety clawed at him again. As they began checking his vitals, a tight knot formed in Harold's stomach. The paramedic placed a finger on his wrist to check his pulse while another readied equipment nearby. A few moments passed with only the sound of muted beeping from machines filling the air while tension coiled around them like an uninvited guest. "You're doing great," one paramedic said reassuringly, though Harold could see concern etched across their faces. "Just keep breathing normally." But it wasn't long before they began exchanging looks filled with unspoken worry, a silent communication that made Harold's heart race even faster. "Sir, we're picking up some early signs of cardiac arrest," came the urgent voice of one paramedic as he glanced up from the monitor displaying Harold's vitals. "What?" Harold breathed sharply in disbelief, panic flooding through him again as if he had been plunged into icy water. He looked over at Zeus for reassurance, but found instead that the dog remained focused and alert beside him, sensing that something significant was happening. "Listen closely," the paramedic continued while preparing equipment for further assessment. "We need to move quickly to ensure your safety." The reality of what they were saying sunk in like lead. Everything suddenly felt surreal yet undeniably real all at once. This wasn't just about Zeus, it was about him too, and time was slipping away. Zeus seemed aware of this shift in atmosphere. He leaned closer against Harold's leg, as if trying to shield him from all that hovered ominously around them. Each bark echoing from his throat resonated much louder than usual, an urgent plea for action or perhaps understanding of what lay ahead. As they proceeded with their assessments and preparations for transport to the hospital, Harold struggled with mixed emotions. Fear about what might happen next clashed against gratitude for having such devoted care right there in front of him. "Hang in there," one responding medic encouraged softly while establishing communication with dispatch about their findings. In those moments fraught with intensity and uncertainty, the realization gripped Harold fiercely. Zeus's strange behavior earlier that night hadn't been random at all. It had been a warning sign pointing towards something dangerously real that neither man nor dog could ignore any longer. With every passing second feeling crucial now more than ever, he knew this bond forged between them would guide them through whatever storm awaited beyond these walls. They were stronger together than either could have ever imagined facing alone. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air as Harold was wheeled into the hospital room, the harsh fluorescent lights flickering above like distant stars in a foreign universe. The sounds of beeping machines and muffled conversations echoed around him, creating a chaotic symphony that heightened his anxiety. He lay on the gurney, still feeling the echoes of fear and confusion from the previous hours. But now there was a glimmer of hope in the presence of his daughter beside him. She had rushed to the hospital, her eyes wide with concern. But there was also a steady determination in her demeanor that anchored Harold amidst the whirlwind of emotions he felt. As she held his hand, her warm grip brought him comfort, anchoring him in reality while doctors busily moved about, preparing to assess his condition further. "Dad, I'm so glad you're okay," she said softly, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. "I was worried when I got your call." "I'm sorry for worrying you," he replied, his voice shaky as he tried to process everything that had happened. "I just didn't know what to do." Before he could say more, she pulled a folder from her bag and placed it gently on his lap. "I have something important to show you," she said, her expression turning serious. "I need you to read this." Curiosity mingled with apprehension as Harold looked down at the folder. He opened it slowly, flipping through its contents. Inside were documents detailing Zeus's training, certificates, assessments, and notes outlining how he had been specially trained as a cardiac and low-oxygen alert K9. "What is this?" Harold asked, confusion knitting his brow. "I arranged this 6 months ago," his daughter explained, her voice steady yet filled with affection. "After your first minor cardiac episode, I couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to change. I secretly had Zeus trained to help alert you if anything went wrong with your health." Harold's heart raced as he processed her words. "You did what?" he exclaimed softly, both shocked and touched. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I knew you would refuse help if you thought it was necessary," she admitted gently. "But I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I wanted to ensure you were safe." As Harold continued to read through the documents, his mind flooded with realization. Every strange behavior from Zeus, the pawing, the barking, had not been random. They had been alerts warning him that something was amiss within himself. The gravity of this truth settled over him like a heavy blanket. "You mean, he's been doing his job all along?" Harold's voice was barely a whisper. "Exactly," she nodded, her smile tentative but proud. "He was always watching out for you, Dad." Tears welled up in Harold's eyes as he looked at the papers detailing how Zeus had been trained to sense life-threatening conditions. The bond between them took on an entirely new depth, one forged not only in companionship but in a shared purpose that neither had fully understood until now. In that moment of clarity amidst the chaos of the hospital room, Harold realized how crucial Zeus had been in protecting him without him even knowing it. The fear that once constricted his heart began to lift as gratitude surged within him. Together, they had navigated not just loneliness but also the shadows of uncertainty. As he reached for his daughter's hand again, Harold felt an overwhelming sense of hope for the future, for himself and for Zeus. Their journey together was far from over. They would face whatever came next side by side, stronger than ever before. As Harold sat in the hospital room, still trying to process everything that had happened, His daughter took a deep breath before continuing her explanation about Zeus's training. She could see the confusion and disbelief etched on her father's face, and she wanted to help him understand the extent of her actions. "Dad, when you had that first cardiac episode 6 months ago, I knew I couldn't just sit back and hope for the best," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I was scared for you. I couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to change." Harold's brow furrowed as he listened, struggling to connect the dots. "So, what did you do?" he asked, curiosity mixed with apprehension. "I reached out to the shelter where you adopted Zeus," she explained, her eyes focused intently on him. "I wanted to know if they offered any programs for training dogs as service animals. They told me they had an excellent program for training K9s to become cardiac alert dogs, and I knew I had to do it." "But why didn't you tell me?" Harold interrupted, a wave of concern washing over him. "I would have wanted to be involved. I know you would have, but I also knew how you felt about needing help," she replied gently. "You've always been so independent, Dad. I was afraid you'd refuse if you knew." Harold felt a mix of emotions: shock, gratitude, and a hint of anger at being kept in the dark. "I can't believe you did this without telling me," he said softly, shaking his head as he processed the weight of her words. "I did what I thought was best for you," she insisted. "Zeus has gone through training specifically to alert you if something was wrong with your heart or if your oxygen levels dropped. I didn't want to put any extra pressure on you. I just wanted you to be safe." As he absorbed this information, Harold realized just how profound this decision was. Not only had his daughter taken matters into her own hands, but she had also given Zeus a purpose that went beyond companionship. He had become a guardian of sorts. "Every time he pawed at me or barked, it wasn't just random behavior," Harold murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "He was trying to warn me." "Exactly," his daughter confirmed, a smile breaking through her concern. "He's been doing his job all along without either of us knowing it." The realization washed over Harold like a wave of warmth. All those moments when he felt anxious or confused suddenly felt more significant. They were tied to something deeper than mere canine quirks. Zeus had been watching over him, tuned into something that Harold hadn't even recognized within himself. "But why didn't the shelter say anything when I took him back?" Harold asked, feeling a sense of betrayal seep in. "They've been keeping my secret too," she explained. "They knew I had arranged for Zeus's training but couldn't disclose that information since it was confidential. They wanted to ensure that you both had the chance to bond without any pressure." Harold leaned back against the pillow, absorbing everything she had shared. The love and care she had shown him through this decision left him feeling grateful yet overwhelmed. "Thank you for looking out for me," he finally said, his voice shaking with emotion as he reached out to squeeze her hand. "I don't know what I would have done without you or without Zeus." In that moment, surrounded by the bright hospital lights and the faint hum of medical equipment, Harold felt an overwhelming sense of hope blossom within him. He understood now that he wasn't alone in this fight. He had his daughter by his side and a loyal dog who had been guarding him all along. Together, they would navigate the challenges ahead and emerge stronger than ever before. As Harold sat in the hospital bed, a blend of gratitude and disbelief coursed through him. His daughter's revelation about Zeus's training had shaken him to the core. He was still processing the significance of her actions when she gently squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with concern. "Dad, I know this may feel overwhelming," she began carefully, gauging his reaction. "But it was necessary for me to keep this secret from you." "Why?" Harold asked, the question lingering in the air between them as he tried to comprehend her motives. "Why wouldn't you just tell me?" She took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts before explaining further. "I was worried that if you knew, you would refuse help. You've always been so independent, and I feared you'd see this as a weakness. I couldn't let your pride get in the way of your health." The weight of her words hung heavily in the room. Harold felt a mixture of frustration and understanding wash over him. He considered how fiercely protective he had always been about his own autonomy, how he often avoided accepting help for fear of appearing vulnerable. "I didn't want to be a burden," he admitted quietly, realizing that it was a sentiment they both shared. I know, and that's why I made this decision, she continued, her voice soft yet unwavering. I wanted to ensure that you had someone looking out for you without feeling like you were being forced into it. It was my way of keeping you safe while allowing you to keep your sense of independence. As Harold listened, he couldn't help but reflect on how his stubbornness had shaped his life after losing his wife. I couldn't sit by and watch you struggle without doing something. Harold's heart swelled with emotion as he intertwined his fingers with hers. This act of service, a quiet commitment hidden behind the scenes, had forged an unbreakable bond among them all. Harold, his daughter, and Zeus. It dawned on him that every time Zeus had pawed at him or barked anxiously, it hadn't simply been random behavior but rather a heartfelt response to Harold's condition. Thank you for making sure I was taken care of, he said, tears glistening in his eyes. I didn't realize until now just how crucial Zeus has been, or how brave you were to go behind my back for my sake. In that moment of vulnerability, a shift occurred between them. Barriers crumbled as they embraced their shared journey. A journey marked by love, sacrifice, and understanding. They were navigating an unfamiliar landscape together, but now they did so with renewed strength. I promise to be more open about accepting help in the future, Harold vowed softly, looking deeply into his daughter's eyes. With a nod, she smiled gently and added, and I promise to be there for you whenever you need me. You're not alone in this fight. The room felt lighter as they shared a glimpse of hope amid uncertainty. Harold could now better appreciate Zeus's presence, not just as a loyal companion, but as a protector who had been silently guarding him all along. Together with his daughter, they were ready to face whatever lay ahead, united by trust and love, prepared to navigate the challenges together side by side. As Harold absorbed the news of Zeus's training and the lengths his daughter had gone to ensure his safety, a thought lingered in the back of his mind. You mentioned that the shelter kept this a secret for 2 years, he said. His curiosity piqued as he looked directly into her eyes. How did they get involved in this? His daughter took a moment to gather her thoughts, her expression shifting to one of earnestness as she recounted what had transpired. After your first cardiac episode, I knew I needed to act quickly. I contacted the shelter because I wanted to explore training options for Zeus, but I never anticipated how deeply involved they would be in helping me. She paused, glancing toward the window as if looking back through time. They were supportive and eager to assist. Once I explained my concerns about your health and how I wanted Zeus to be more than just a companion, they decided to keep everything between us confidential. They understood my reasoning and wanted to give you both the chance to bond without any external pressures. Harold leaned back against the hospital bed, still processing the complexities of it all. He never imagined that the shelter staff would have conspired with his daughter. But why would they keep it from me? He asked, a feeling of betrayal creeping into his thoughts. They believed that if you knew Zeus had undergone special training, you might dismiss it or refuse to accept help altogether, she replied earnestly. I mean, how often do you think about accepting assistance? The shelter staff witnessed your independence firsthand when you brought him home. They knew that you'd want to tackle issues yourself rather than rely on a trained dog. The realization hit Harold like a wave. He often pushed away offers of help or support because he didn't want to feel vulnerable or incapable. The idea that others understood this side of him made him feel exposed yet relieved that they acted with such care. Did they not think I'd feel betrayed knowing Zeus had been trained? Harold continued, trying to understand their reasoning further. They knew, she insisted gently, squeezing his hand again. But their priority was your well-being. They believed that with time and familiarity, you would grow comfortable with Zeus's capabilities without having it forced upon you initially. As Harold pondered her words, gratitude began mingling with frustration within him. He appreciated their good intentions but found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. It was heartwarming to know how much love went into ensuring his safety, yet frustrating that he had unknowingly been kept in the dark. Every time he pawed at me or barked, he was trying to warn me all along, Harold murmured slowly, realization dawning on him fully now. Each moment spent questioning Zeus's behavior felt different. Those actions held purpose beyond mere pet antics. Yes, she nodded softly. He was alerting you silently, while also watching out for your health. An overwhelming sense of connection surged within Harold as he leaned in closer, reflecting on how intertwined their lives truly were. The shelter's decision, his daughter's secret efforts, and Zeus's unwavering loyalty had created an unbreakable bond among them. In that moment, surrounded by sterile hospital walls and glowing lights, Harold felt lighter than ever before. The weight of uncertainty began to lift. They were not just navigating challenging times. They were doing so together with love as their guiding force. "I'm grateful for all of this," he finally said. "I don't think I ever fully acknowledged how important Zeus truly is." She smiled warmly in response, knowing that together they could face whatever came next. Not only as father and daughter, but also as a unified family alongside their loyal protector, who had always been there waiting patiently for this moment. As Harold sat quietly, contemplating the profound changes unfolding in his life, it struck him just how vital Zeus had been all along. The realization that his rescue dog had silently watched over him, alerting him to unseen dangers without his knowledge, created a deep sense of clarity and gratitude within him. Every anxious moment when Zeus had pawed at him or barked vigorously was not just a quirky behavior but a form of communication. A desperate attempt to protect his owner from harm. Harold closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the weight of this epiphany. All those times I felt uneasy. He wasn't just being a dog, was he? He murmured to himself, feeling tears begin to pool in his eyes. The truth of their bond sunk in deep. It was rooted in instinct and loyalty, stretched into spaces where words often failed. "Dad!" His daughter's voice gently interrupted his reverie. He looked up at her, finding empathy written all over her face. "It's okay to feel this way. It's a lot to process," she reassured him softly. He nodded slowly, grappling with the emotions spilling forth from his heart. "I can't believe you kept this secret," Harold said, shaking his head slightly. "It's hard to accept that you thought I'd refuse help." "I did what I thought was right," she replied with unwavering sincerity. "And I knew that if Zeus came to understand what was happening with your health, before you even did, he could step in when it mattered most. And he was doing that all along," Harold added, awe mixing with emotion as he stroked Zeus's fur absent-mindedly, while recalling the interaction between them throughout the months prior. The frightened barks through still night air now resonated with purpose. Zeus shifted slightly beside him, tilting his head as if sensing the escalating tension of Harold's thoughts melt into understanding and peace. "He must have sensed something was wrong before I even registered it," Harold reflected out loud, now fully aware that every action had been an alert on the part of his loyal companion. "Exactly," she responded softly, pride illuminating her features for both her father and Zeus. "He was keeping watch for you while also trying to keep things normal between you both." A warm wave of affection surged through Harold for both his daughter and Zeus. He realized how fragile life could be, yet appreciated all the more those bonds he'd formed amidst grief and loneliness since losing his wife. In this challenging moment, their connection solidified beyond mere companionship. They were tethered by unspoken trust nurtured through shared experiences and protective instincts. In that bright hospital room filled with medical equipment and sounds of clinical life bustling around them, despite threats lurking outside, the significance of their relationship felt immense. Between whispered assurances and the gentle pressures of familial love stood Zeus, a fierce guardian who had taken on unnoticed responsibilities without hesitation. "I know that from here on out," Harold began determinedly as he gazed into his daughter's eyes near misting with understanding. "Everything is going to look different. And it will," she reassured him, with renewed confidence blossoming within him alongside a deeper appreciation for both Zeus's safeguarding instincts and his daughter's unwavering support. Harold acknowledged that together they would navigate whatever challenges awaited them in the future. Whoever might try breaking through barriers they had spent so long fortifying together. The nuances of their shared journey became glaringly apparent. They were bound tightly by love in ways words could scarcely capture, emerging stronger from trials shared amid perilous storms that once felt insurmountable alone. And now, they were far from alone. They were family united under protection seen not merely through duty but rather layered years' worth of trust painstakingly put together one moment at a time. As the moments passed in the hospital room, Harold felt a profound sense of resolution settling within him. The revelation of Zeus's training had shifted something fundamental in their relationship, illuminating the importance of their bond. No longer did he see Zeus simply as a pet. He recognized him as a guardian who had been silently fulfilling his duty to protect Harold's well-being. With each heartbeat and every breath he took, Harold felt gratitude envelop him like a comforting blanket. He remembered the uncertainty that had plagued him in recent months, and how each anxious moment had clouded his ability to appreciate the unwavering loyalty of his rescue dog. "I can't believe I almost took you back to the shelter," he murmured, looking down at Zeus, who remained steadfastly by his side, his eyes bright with understanding. "From now on," Harold continued, speaking softly as if sharing a secret with his loyal companion, "you and I are in this together." He realized that returning Zeus to the shelter would not only mean losing his best friend, but also severing the vital connection they had forged through shared experiences and challenges. His daughter watched intently as her father processed this newfound clarity. Harold's expression shifted from one of worry to one of conviction. "I'll never take you back again," he promised Zeus earnestly, feeling an overwhelming desire to affirm their bond. "You're my protector now, my partner, and I understand that more than ever before." Zeus responded by leaning into Harold's leg, a silent acknowledgement of their deepening trust. In that moment, it became crystal clear to Harold just how essential this partnership was for both of them. His path forward would be filled with challenges, but knowing that Zeus would always be beside him made everything feel more manageable. Harold looked up at his daughter, appreciation shining through his eyes. "Thank you for believing in me." "And him," he said genuinely. "I finally see now how vital Zeus's role has been in my life." His daughter smiled warmly, sensing the relief washing over them both. It was clear that this journey they were on wasn't merely about facing health challenges. It was also about building an unbreakable family bond strengthened by love, understanding, and shared purpose. The hospital room felt less sterile and more like a sanctuary where healing could occur, not just physically but emotionally as well. With renewed commitment bubbling within him, Harold understood that accepting help didn't make him weak. It made him human. This lesson would shape their lives moving forward, the strength found in vulnerability. As they prepared to leave the hospital later that day, Harold felt lighter than he had in months. He gazed down at Zeus with renewed affection, appreciating every moment they spent together. The walks in the park, quiet evenings on the couch, and even those restless nights when anxiety stirred within him. Each experience had woven them closer together. "I promise you this," he said as they stepped outside into the fresh air. "We'll face everything together from here on out." With that promise echoing in the stillness around them, Harold took a deep breath and felt certain they were ready for whatever came next, together as family. In that moment of acceptance and appreciation for Zeus's loyalty and support, even amid uncertainty, Harold knew that their journey was just beginning but held endless possibilities ahead as long as they faced it all side by side.